This is the second week of Personal Finance Decathlon notes, and this week's notes will be split into two sections. The first one will be on earning income, and the second one will be on taxes. So the first section on income, briefly want to look at the issue of careers. Obviously, when you talk about earning income, you need to think a little bit about how this earning income works, how a person finds a job, why different people get paid different levels of income, and then, of course, we'll look a little bit at how labor markets work. So first we have this big graphic that looks at how do Americans actually earn their income. And most Americans earn their income through wages and salaries. I need to move this a little bit here. So the purple bars are wages and salaries, and they say about 70% of our national income comes from wages and salaries. But if you look at this nice table, it shows you that people in different brackets earn their income from different sources. So people who are earning, this is not just millionaires, but people actually are earning more than $1 million a year, you can see that they're only earning about 29% of their income from wages and salaries. And that a significant portion, 42.6%, is coming from investment income, and about 24.2% from business income, meaning that they are likely entrepreneurs or co-owners of some type of business. So people who are earning profits from businesses and people who are earning investment income because they own a lot of stock or other types of investments like real estate, they're more likely to be earning $1 million a year. You can see most of the other brackets here, most people are getting most of their money from wages and salaries. You can also see that in that top one we don't have very much retirement income. Not very many retired people are earning more than $1 million a year, but in the other brackets we can see that retirement income does contribute significantly to Americans' income. Okay, so when you talk about income, you can't really talk about income without talking about human capital. And human capital is your accumulated skills, knowledge, training, abilities, etc. All the things that make you either a very effective, efficient worker or not a very effective, efficient worker. And we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to the labor market. But one of the keys, of course, to getting yourself into a high wage or high salary job is to develop your human capital. And that's why you're in high school, and that's why many of you or all of you will go to college. Many of you might get further degrees, business degrees, law, medicine, maybe a PhD. So what can you do to make yourself a good candidate for a job? Well, obviously education is a big part of it. A lot of high-paying jobs are only open to people who have college degrees or higher. Training, the actual skills you have. What do you know how to do? Do you know how to run a particular kind of machinery? Do you know how to write computer code? Do you know how to deal with a certain kind of situation, for example, administering CPR? So those can all count as training. Work experience, who have you worked for? What do they say about you? What have you actually learned on the job? What's your attitude? What's your personality? Are you a resilient person? Are you a creative person? And then your productivity. So how quickly do you work? How fast can you type? How long does it take you to write a report? So all those kinds of things factor into your human capital. When you want to find a job from a very practical standpoint, the process has 6 steps. You won't necessarily do them in this order, but finding openings is one. Writing a letter of application is another. Preparing a resume, or in the case of the education fields, it's considered a curriculum vitae or a CV. Filling out a job application if there is one. Getting invited to an interview and completing the interview, and then sending a thank you note. So those are considered the 6 steps. Frequently, a person might prepare their resume and put it online, or prepare an online persona through something like LinkedIn, and then they might get connected to job openings that way. So as I said, you wouldn't necessarily do the steps in this order. And also for a lot of jobs, there may not actually be a formal application. You might just send a letter along with a resume and say, I'm interested in this job for this reason. Okay, so another way of looking at this, if you're looking for a job, where to find jobs or how to connect with people, there's job search websites. Major newspapers have job search websites. There's other ones connect in different fields. Monster.com is one that's very wide open. You also might look at networking sites like LinkedIn. If you don't have a LinkedIn account, you should certainly create a LinkedIn account even now. Just connect with the people you know. Connect with your parents. Connect with your relatives. Connect with your neighbors. Because you never know who might know someone who has a job opening. And if you can actually be connected to them, you're more likely to get your foot in the door. And then finally, of course, you want to be able to state a career objective. So if you have a LinkedIn page, you're going to want to say, what is your purpose? What is it that you want to accomplish? An interesting thing about the interview, when you are interviewed for a job, and that might happen in person, it can happen by Skype, it can happen on the phone. There's all kinds of things they can ask you, but mostly they have to stick to asking you things that actually have to do with the job and your qualifications for the job, maybe how you've done a similar job, how your education would apply. There's a whole long list of things they can't ask. They can't ask your age except to confirm that you're not a minor, so they can't try to find out whether you're 45 years old as opposed to 35 years old. They can't ask you whether English is your first language. They can listen to you talk, but they can't ask that question, and they can't discriminate against you on that basis. They also can't ask, they can ask if you're a citizen, but they cannot, or if you have a permit to work, but they cannot demand to know whether you were a natural-born citizen or if you went through naturalization. They can't ask anything about your credit rating, your credit report. They can't ask about any arrests that were not convictions. They can ask about convictions. They also can't ask about any political protests you've been part of or any associations or religion. They can't ask you your gender or race, although, of course, if they're meeting with you in person, they'll figure that out. They cannot ask you your weight or height unless it's a legitimate job requirement. They cannot discriminate against you because you're overweight or underweight. And they cannot ask you if you're married or if you have children. So there are all sorts of laws that regulate in the United States what can and can't be asked at a job interview. Okay, this slide has the labor market, and we've actually done the labor market in economics, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it, but just maybe look a little bit at some of those terms. But if you look at a labor market, of course, we have the labor supply curve, and we have the labor demand curve, which is going to be based on the MRP of the workers, marginal revenue product. We have here wages, and here we have quantity of workers, and of course there's different labor markets for different kinds of jobs with different skills. So this would be in this market an equilibrium wage, right, and an equilibrium number of workers. And the things that that play into labor supply, of course, labor supply is directly related to wages, but you might remember that there's such a thing as a backward bending labor supply curve. In other words, labor supply is upward sloping because as people earn more money, they're more willing to substitute work for leisure. And you know they want to be able to afford more things, but at a certain point, because their income has gone up, and the income effect says that with more income you want more leisure, they might in fact reduce their willingness to work because they start to value that leisure. They have enough income to start valuing leisure over work time. Labor demand, as I said, is based on your MRP or the MRP of workers in a particular industry, which means that physical productivity and marginal revenues. Labor demand is a derived demand. So demand for a particular kind of worker is derived from demand for products from the industry in which that worker is seeking a job. Other things that might affect labor supply in any particular labor market is non-money benefits or fringe benefits, so things like retirement, healthcare plans, stock purchase options, that all sorts of things that come with a particular job. And then rent, interest, and profit, they don't really fit here exactly. Those are other ways in which people earn income, which we talked about before. And then determinants of income would also include things like compensating differentials, where people get paid more because they have to do like dirty or dangerous work. So all those things are going to factor into equilibrium wage in the labor market. A few other income terms. One is that, just to understand that wages and salaries are different. Wages are hourly, right? So we think of a lot of people like store clerks and servers as being wage workers, whereas a lot of people are salaried employees, right? So obviously a lot of people like engineers, we think of people getting highly paid jobs or getting salaries, but also people like teachers and social workers and a lot of government employees have salaries. Real wages are distinct from wages because real wages are adjusted for inflation and they represent purchasing power rather than simply money or a dollar figure. A commission is a particular way of getting paid, and when you are earning a commission, you are getting a certain percentage of each sale. So that would, people who get commissions would often be salespeople. They involve people like real estate agents as well as auto salespeople. They might get a certain fixed wage as well as a commission, or they might work entirely on commission. Also, oftentimes people in the financial industry, like financial advisors, work on commission. Tips. Minimum wage differs for servers because they also get income from tips. And tips just mean they're completely voluntary, right? They're not like commissions. If you like the service you're giving a particular restaurant, you might leave a tip, or if you like the service from a bellboy at a hotel. Overtime is when, if people, according to the Fair Labor Standards Act, if you work beyond 40 hours a week in specific kinds of jobs, and a lot of people are exempt from that, doesn't count for people who are salaried employees, it has to be a wage worker, you actually get time and a half, which means whatever your wage is, you get paid 50% more. And finally, minimum wage. You know about this from econ class. You do need to know the amounts. So the federal minimum wage right now is $7.25 an hour, and Minnesota's minimum wage is $8 an hour. Okay, another thing you need to know is that some people are entrepreneurs, right? And so instead of going out and getting a job after high school or when you graduate from college, some people don't apply for a job, they start their own job, right? And so to be an entrepreneur, you probably already realize you're probably a bit of a risk taker, an innovative thinker, somebody who likes to work for themselves and not necessarily have to answer to a boss, somebody who's willing to fail and get back up and try again, because most entrepreneurial ventures, more than 50%, actually fail. So there's a few things about entrepreneurs there. They tend to be, as I said, idea people. We sort of stereotype them as being in their 20s, but actually it's very common for people to become entrepreneurs as sort of a second career in their 40s. Some people are also what we call intrapreneurs, which means they start to innovate within a particular industry career field that they already work in, and then they start to innovate within a particular firm. So the incentive for entrepreneurs, of course, is economic profit, that entrepreneurs would get to keep the profits of a firm they started or share them with other people who have invested. They're willing to take risks. Primarily the risk is that you're going to lose your money. They have to develop a business plan, and they have to consider direct costs, or the costs of buying resources from others, as well as indirect costs, which includes the cost of their own time. Okay, so what goes in a business plan? These are all the pieces of a very simple business plan. The basic concept, what you're producing and selling, your strategy for producing and selling it, what you think is your competitive advantage, what are you going to do better than other people, your target market, or who in particular are going to be your customers. Are you going for students? Are you going for retirees? Are you marketing to young parents? Are you marketing in a particular geographical area? Do you want to get people, young adults in New York City, or are you looking for retirees in the South? You also would provide information about your management team. So who are you? What background do you have? What makes you an expert? But also your employees. And then your financing needs. So how much money do you need, and where do you plan to spend it? Okay, so that it brings us to the end of this tape, and I will start the next one with part 2.